A game you can download for free generated more than $6 billion last year. A different game, one a major studio spent $400 million to build, was shut down 14 days after launch, having earned roughly $1 million in its entire commercial existence. Same industry, same year, same business model. And if you know what to look for, both outcomes make complete sense. Here is the picture most people carry. A studio builds a game, sells it, earns money. That picture is real, and it captures maybe a third of what's actually happening. The video game industry has spent the last 2 decades constructing something far more sophisticated around that basic premise. A machine for converting human attention into recurring revenue across as many axes as possible. The $60 retail box was always just the door. The system behind it was built to keep charging players, in different ways, for as long as they're willing to stay. Picture it like a Russian nesting doll. Crack the outer shell, there's another shell inside. Crack that one, another. Making a game and getting it into a player's hands passes through a series of layers, and each one takes a cut before anything reaches the center. The engine maker took their share before the game even shipped. The platform took 30% the moment someone clicked buy. The publisher took a significant share of what was left. And the developer, the people who actually built the thing, reached into the center of the doll and found whatever remained. Depending on the deal, somewhere between 20 and 40 cents of every original dollar a player spent. This is the real financial architecture of how a game gets made and sold. Understanding which layer you sit in, and which layer you want to be in, is the most important financial judgment anyone inside this business can make. Hold on to that image, it explains more about this industry than almost anything else. Your entry point depends entirely on scale. On the small end, a solo developer with a real idea and the free tier of a modern game engine can start for under $20,000. Mostly their own labor, a few thousand in contract art, a handful of licensing fees. But the honest math on that entry point is brutal. More than 5,000 games released on Steam in a recent 12-month period failed to earn even $100 in their entire commercial lifetime. The median Steam release earned around $250 gross, before the platform's cut, before taxes, before you even count the hours you put in. Only around 300 titles, out of roughly 20,000 releases in a recent year, cleared $1 million in revenue. The indie market is a lottery where most tickets return less than a single week of freelance work. Move up to a mid-tier production, a real team, a 3 to 5 year development cycle, a genuine shot at commercial viability, and your budget runs between $5 million and $50 million. You need programmers, artists, level designers, quality assurance testers, a sound team, and a producer holding it all together. Senior developers in North America earn between $120,000 and $250,000 a year. A team of 30 people, working for 4 years, is a $10 to $15 million payroll before a single playable build exists. Then there's AAA, which is less a budget category and more a survival strategy, one that requires either a publisher's capital or a parent corporation's balance sheet just to attempt. A modern AAA game, the kind built to compete for Game of the Year coverage and a $100 million launch week, now routinely costs $200 million in development alone. Before marketing, Spider-Man 2 was estimated at around $300 million in production. Red Dead Redemption 2 reportedly ran between $370 million and $540 million, combined. And here's the part that's genuinely hard to picture. At the current known edge of the scale, Rockstar has reportedly committed somewhere between $1 billion and $2 billion across the full lifecycle of GTA 6, a build that's been in serious production for over a decade, with thousands of developers drawing salaries the entire time. Those numbers are contested, and Rockstar has confirmed nothing officially, but multiple analysts working from Take-Two's public filings have triangulated figures in that range. The honest answer is that the real number is known only to a small group at Take-Two, and that uncertainty is itself telling. A budget in that range, for a sequel to an existing franchise, is a scale of creative risk with no clear precedent anywhere in entertainment. So what fills those budgets? Human capital, overwhelmingly. A 300-person studio, mid-sized, by major publisher standards, runs $40 to $60 million a year in salaries alone, without a single shipped title. Over a 5 to 7 year AAA development cycle, before motion capture, before voice acting, before quality assurance contractors, middleware licenses, localization for a global release, the infrastructure for online features, you're already at $200 million, and the game is still in pre-alpha. Stay with me here, because the scale gets stranger. Quality assurance alone on a major title routinely employs 100 or more full-time testers for the final 18 months of production, working through thousands of hours of content across every platform the game has to ship on. The sheer asset volume of a modern open-world game, every tree, every building, every piece of music, every line of voice dialogue, every custom animation, needs an industrial production pipeline that rivals the physical output of a mid-sized manufacturing operation. Here's the hidden multiplier, the one that turns the development budget into roughly half the actual cost. Marketing. The industry's working rule of thumb, confirmed by publisher earnings data and post-launch disclosures over many years, is that a AAA game's marketing budget runs at approximately 75 to 100% of its development cost. Build the game for $200 million. Spend another $150 to $200 million just telling the world it exists. Every television campaign, every influencer deal, every demo suite at a major games expo, every paid placement on a platform storefront, all of it stacks on top of the development number you already knew. Then add the engine fee, and this one arrives before revenue even starts. Build your game in Unreal Engine, and you owe Epic Games 5% of every dollar earned above the first $1 million in lifetime revenue. A rate recently cut to 3.5% for developers who also launch on the Epic Games Store. At the reduced rate, a game earning $500 million has quietly written a $17.5 million check to Epic before any other cut has even been taken. Engine fees sit first in line, before the platform cut, before the publisher cut, before taxes. They compound silently into the cost of every game built on licensed technology. And if a publisher funded your development, there's one more mechanism the public-facing financials almost never show. Recoupment. When a publisher advances you $50 million to build your game, they withhold revenue from you until they've recovered that $50 million first. During the recoupment period, you typically see between 0 and 20% of net revenue. Your game can be genuinely selling, reaching players, earning good reviews, beating projections, and your monthly royalty statement can still show $0 owed, because the recoupment clock is still running. Approximately 81% of publishing advances include this clause. The developer's share of the revenue curve looks like water filling a reservoir. It rises, the level climbs, but nothing flows downstream until it clears the dam. The dam can take years to clear on a large advance. Some developers clear it, some run out the contract terms still inside it. Assume the game ships successfully. The spending changes shape. If your game has any online component, which, in the current market, means nearly every title aiming at commercial viability, you're now running server infrastructure around the clock. A mid-sized live service game with a few 100,000 active monthly players costs $3 to $5 million a year in cloud compute and bandwidth. Scale to a flagship title with tens of millions of players, and that annual infrastructure bill climbs past $50 million. These are recurring costs. Every month the game is live, no ceiling tied to its age. Your development team stays intact after launch. Studios that ship a live service title keep their workforce on for patching cycles, expansion content, the continuous update schedule the market now treats as a baseline. The 200-person team that built the game is still a 200-person team the week after launch, still drawing salaries, still burning through the operational budget, except now the game has to earn enough to cover both the ongoing team cost and start returning on the original investment. The human capital layer carries one more cost, one that shows up in every post-mortem but almost never in any financial disclosure. Turnover. From crunch. Extended mandatory overtime in the months before launch is widespread across the industry, and the burnout it causes drives experienced developers out, at a real cost in replacement hiring and institutional knowledge lost mid-project. When the lead systems designer who built the core progression loop leaves 2 months before release, that cost shows up in delayed patches and unresolved launch week bugs, never on a balance sheet. If you want your game to reach players at all, you have to pay for visibility, in ways that need insider knowledge just to see. Steam releases roughly 14,000 new titles a year. The algorithm that decides which games reach which players is driven primarily by launch week sales velocity, which means your first week determines most of your algorithmic future, which means studios pour budget into the launch window specifically to drive early numbers, which drives placement, which drives more sales. A YouTube influencer campaign targeting gaming audiences, for a mid-tier launch, runs between $500,000 and several $1 million. Major console storefronts feature games at launch and negotiated placements. Console certification, the technical compliance process required by PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo before any game can ship, costs money in developer hardware, submission fees, and quality assurance time. and a failed pass means delay and resubmission costs pile on. In practice, this spend is the price of algorithmic visibility on a platform releasing 14,000 games a year. Skip it, and your game arrives into a void. The category of risk with no mitigation strategy is platform dependency. When your game lives on someone else's engine, sells through someone else's store, runs on someone else's hardware, any of those parties can change their terms in ways that rewrite the math on your existing business, overnight. In September of 2023, Unity announced a per-install fee, a charge triggered every single time a player installed a game built on the engine. For studios running free-to-play games, where installs are the entire growth mechanism, the math showed that some existing titles would owe Unity more money per install than those games earned per install. The backlash from the developer community was severe enough that Unity reversed the policy within 2 weeks. But the underlying exposure remained. Studios had built their entire businesses on Unity's engine and discovered in real time that the platform they depended on could unilaterally restructure the cost of games already in players' hands. There's no lease to enforce, no grandfathered terms, no protection against a policy change applying retroactively to products already released. The dependency is total. Trace your revenue from the beginning. The traditional model, someone pays $60 or $70 for a game, is still real, and for the biggest launches it still generates enormous first-week numbers. But as a share of the total gaming economy, one-time sales revenue has been declining for years, replaced by something financially more sophisticated. In the most recently reported full year of data, 58% of all PC gaming revenue came from microtransactions, purchases made after the game was already downloaded. Fortnite, which has never charged $1 to enter and has never gated core gameplay behind a paywall, generated more than $6 billion in a recent year, selling outfits, emotes, seasonal battle passes, collaboration skins with musicians, athletes, film franchises. Zero barrier to entry. Pure upside from a player base that voluntarily spends on things that change nothing except how they look. The financial engine behind this is a player behavior pattern the industry actually has a name for. They call it the whale model. In free-to-play mobile games, approximately 5% of players generate roughly 65% of all revenue. Your game is designed at every level, its reward cycles, its friction points, its scarcity signals, the exact moment a limited-time item appears in the shop, to find the players with the highest spending potential and build progressively stronger purchase incentives specifically for them. The average transaction for a high-spending mobile player runs around $20. The same player makes that transaction again the following week, and again the month after, sometimes for years. The 95% who spend nothing aren't dead weight. They're load-bearing infrastructure. They're the social environment that makes the game worth playing for the 5% who spend everything. Remove the non-payers, and the game loses the population that makes it feel alive, which removes the reason for the high spenders to stay. The free players sustain the paying players sustain the game. The subscription layer stacks on top of unit sales and microtransactions. Xbox Game Pass holds around 40 million subscribers, generating close to $5 billion a year. PlayStation Plus holds around 47 million subscribers, generating close to $4 billion. Developers who place their games on Game Pass get a negotiated lump sum from Microsoft, rather than per-unit revenue. That smooths income, but it can also cannibalize individual sales. The economics of subscription placement are still unsettled across the industry, and the right answer differs by studio size, game type, leverage at the negotiating table. A small studio might take a Game Pass deal for guaranteed income and discovery reach. A major publisher with a tentpole launch might decline, to capture full per-unit revenue in the launch window. On mobile, your revenue-sharing structure looks like this. Apple's App Store generated around $52 billion in gaming revenue in the most recently reported year. Google Play added another $30 billion. Both platforms take 30% on most transactions, the exact same percentage as Steam, the PlayStation Store, the Nintendo eShop, the Xbox digital storefront. 30% shows up at every point of sale in the gaming supply chain, regardless of platform, regardless of genre, regardless of whether the game costs $60 or nothing. That's the outer layer of the nesting doll, the one you're always operating inside. Roblox offers an instructive footnote on what happens when a platform controls the entire economy. Roblox creators collectively earned more than $1 billion through the platform's developer program in a recent 12-month period. The top 10 creators averaged around $33 million each. But here's the part that's kind of wild. Roblox's virtual currency, Robux, converts to real money at a rate that gives developers approximately 27 cents per dollar players spend after Roblox is cut. Players buy Robux at face value. Developers exchange them at a steep discount. The platform captures the spread on every transaction. In a closed economy it controls entirely. Creators inside Roblox are building businesses inside someone else's nesting doll, with an extra shell wrapped around it that no other platform model matches. The failure case that maps all of this most precisely is a game called Concord. Sony released it in August of 2024, after 8 years of development at a studio called Firewalk, a studio Sony had acquired specifically to build this one title. The combined investment by the estimates that emerged after the shutdown was $400 million. $200 million getting the game to alpha state. Another $200 million from 2021 through launch day. On Steam, the game peaked at 697 concurrent players, on its best day. For context, a first-time solo developer, on their very first release, would consider 697 concurrent players a credible launch week. Sony pulled Concord offline 11 days after release, having sold around 25,000 copies at roughly $40 each. Roughly $1 million in gross revenue, against $400 million in costs. Firewalk closed permanently 8 weeks later. The mechanism behind this tells you more than the story of one bad game. Concord was a hero shooter, in a genre where Overwatch 2, Valorant, and Apex Legends each hold installed player bases in the tens of millions. A hero shooter needs concurrent players just to fill match queues in reasonable wait times. At 697 concurrent players globally, the queues were empty. Picture it like a restaurant where the tables only activate once they're full. Seat 4 people, and they wait, indefinitely, for the rest of the table to fill. They watch the room stay empty. They go home. The next night, fewer people show up, because words reached them the place was empty. Fewer tables fill, more people leave early. Fewer arrive the following night. The live service model has a specific vulnerability that box sale games simply don't share. The product needs other players to function, and other players need other players to stay. Below a critical threshold of concurrent users, the whole system collapses, regardless of what's actually inside the game. Empty lobbies persist past every patch. An abandoned queue stays empty no matter how deep the discount goes. A different studio, a different publisher, a different genre, the same mechanism. In March of 2022, Square Enix published Babylon's Fall, a live service action RPG developed by Platinum Games. Peak concurrent players on Steam at launch were under 650. By summer, the game regularly registered under 10 simultaneous players, globally. Square Enix shut down the servers in February of 2023, less than 12 months after launch. The financial details stayed officially undisclosed, but the scope of the investment and the near-zero return make this one of the costlier single-title failures in a recent stretch of the industry. 2 years before Concord, different teams, different executives, different creative direction. One mechanism. In roughly that same window, EA's Anthem launched with moderate numbers, ran through 18 months of promised improvements and patch cycles, and was eventually abandoned, servers closing in early 2026. 3 studios, 3 publishers, 3 budget tiers. One pattern. The honest picture of this industry means holding 2 things at once, without resolving the tension between them. The mechanics described above, the layered cuts, the recoupment clocks, the live service death spirals, the lottery economics at the indie end, are real. And they claim studios and careers at a pace the industry's public communications conceal. More than 25,000 gaming jobs were eliminated between 2023 and 2024. Major studios closed. Games in development for years were canceled mid-production. The industry contracted while the revenue charts kept pointing up, which is possible when the revenue goes to the platform layer instead of the developer layer. At the same time, the gaming industry is the only entertainment medium that has produced a single release earning $10 billion over 12 years, and still running. GTA 5, made for somewhere around $265 million in combined development and marketing, generated roughly $1 billion in its first 3 days, faster than any entertainment product in recorded history, and has kept earning somewhere around $700 million a year through GTA Online's microtransaction economy, in years when the base game was already over a decade old. A film franchise's theatrical revenue tapers to near zero within months of release. Music's highest-earning recordings pull in a fraction of that scale in sustained annual revenue from streams and licensing. The combination of a persistent world, a live player community, and a continuous content update cycle has turned the best-executed games into something closer to utilities than products. And utilities, once people depend on them, are genuinely difficult to walk away from. So which corner of this business is actually strongest? Look at who earns regardless of whether any individual game succeeds. Valve, which owns Steam, takes 30% of every digital PC game sold without developing any of the games that run on it. PlayStation takes 30% of every digital sale on its console without bearing creative risk on a single one of those titles. Nintendo does the same. Apple and Google take 30% of every mobile game purchase and every in-app transaction globally, across millions of transactions a day, on games they didn't make, with teams they didn't hire, on creative risks they never took. Steam reportedly generates between $6 and $8 billion a year in revenue. These platforms earn their cut on everything that flows through them, the hits and the concords, equally. The GTA Onlines and the Babylon's Falls. The platform is the one layer of the nesting doll that earns at every outcome. The engine makers sit in a structurally similar position. Epic Games earns royalties on every commercially successful game built in Unreal Engine. Unity earns subscription fees whether or not the games built on it succeed. When the developer loses, the engine maker's subscription still renews. The publisher layer is the financier's position. High leverage, diversified risk across a portfolio, reasonable expected returns even when individual titles fail. A publisher that funds 10 projects expects 3 to fail outright, 4 to break even, 2 to succeed modestly, 1 to perform like a hit. The portfolio math works, even with a Concord in it, as long as the portfolio is large enough and the hits are profitable enough to absorb the losses. That requires balance sheet scale that most independent developers simply don't have. The developer position is the highest risk seat. The people responsible for the actual game, the code, the art, the story, the design, take the smallest guaranteed share of the revenue, carry the most creative risk, and in a publisher deal, often work for years toward royalties while the recoupment clock runs. The studios that have broken that structure on their own terms have proven it doesn't have to work this way. Larian Studios, the makers of Baldur's Gate 3, self-funded the entire development and kept full ownership. They reportedly sold more than 10 million copies and kept the full developer's share of every one of them. No publisher advance, no recoupment clock. But it took years of development, funded entirely from the studio's prior earnings, with no guaranteed return. The reward for that risk was financial independence. The cost was years of existential exposure. The indie end of the developer position is structurally a lottery, a negative expected value for most entrants who account honestly for their own time. The games that break through share some version of the same story. They found a genuine gap in what players wanted. They landed at the right moment in the Steam algorithm. And they either went viral through word of mouth or landed in a major content creator's video during exactly the right week. All of that lies outside reliable engineering. Most entrants learn which bucket they landed in only after the launch week data arrives. Here's the part a spreadsheet fails to capture: why this industry exists, keeps growing, and keeps pulling talented people into a structure that's financially brutal for most of the people in it. Games are the only entertainment medium that's genuinely interactive, and that interactivity creates a depth of engagement and a willingness to spend that passive entertainment has never produced. The most watched films earn audience attention measured in hours per person. The most played games earn it measured in years. A movie ticket buys 2 hours, once. A game purchase can trigger $40 in DLC the same week, and monthly spending for years afterward. The lock-in of a great online game. The identity invested in a character played for hundreds of hours. The social infrastructure of a team that's been playing together across 2 console generations. These have become the scaffolding of people's actual social lives. And that's a harder thing to walk away from than any streaming subscription anyone's ever canceled. The most profitable entertainment product ever made is a 12-year-old video game. Still running, still earning, still adding content. And the studio that built it has reportedly spent more than $1 billion, and a decade, trying to do it again. Every other industry would call that an extraordinary bet on a sequel. In gaming, it's called a release schedule,